All right, good morning or good afternoon. How's everyone? Sorry I couldn't be there today. We are starting our next unit though, so we are going to be talking about in section 9.6 factoring a greatest common factor is what GCF stands for. Now, if you notice, this really is not a new unit, it's just unit 9 part B. If you can imagine trying to do all of this with our other unit 9, it'd be a lot of stuff to cover. So this is kind of like unit 9 part 2. And what we're going to focus on in this unit is factoring quadratics. Basically, just to give you a short rundown of what that means. If you remember last unit, how we were doing all this distributing and multiplying, we're going to be kind of undoing that. We're going to be working backwards in this unit. Okay, so the first way we're going to start with that on section 9.6 is by factoring out what's called a greatest common factor. So let's talk about what a greatest common factor is. Basically, what a greatest common factor is, it is the largest number or variable that every term in an expression can be divided by. All right, so first let's start by looking at just greatest common factors as numbers. And so the first example we're going to look at is this 6x plus 18, which some of you might be able to look at this expression, 6x plus 18, and see what the biggest number you can divide by is. Some of you might be able to look at it and just see that the number is a 6. But for those of you who can't, here's kind of the way you will have to work it instead. Is you're going to have to look at it term by term, starting with 6x. And what you want to try to do is looking at the number, break it down as much as possible. In other words, if you factor it, the smallest you can make 6 is 2 multiplied by 3. So for our term 6x, basically all the factors that we have there, we've got a 2, we've got a 3, and don't forget we still have an x. It's not going to be really important right now, but it will be later. All right, for 18, we're going to do the same thing. So for 18, I would first break it down as 2 and 9, but then 9 you can break down further into 3 multiplied by 3. So for the term 18, you've got 2, 3, and another 3. And then the way you get your greatest common factor using those is you look for where do they overlap. In other words, they both have a 2, they both have a 3, but then that's as much as they have in common. So their greatest common factor, they've got a 2, they've got a 3, 2 multiplied by 3 is 6, and there's your greatest common factor. So I would say that this process that we just went through works. I'd also say that if you could just see 6, you probably don't want to go through all of this work. Now, when we factor out the greatest common factor, what we do, and this is going to be a little different than what we've done in the past. You've got 6x and 18. What you do first is you write your greatest common factor. So you write the 6. Then in parentheses, you take each of these terms and divide by 6. So 6x divided by 6. Let's see, 6x over 6. Well, 6 divided by 6 is just 1. So all you're really left with is x. And then do the same thing with 18. 18 divided by 6 would be 3. So you just put your plus 3. And there's your factoring. All right. So let's do that for each of these examples 1, 2, and 3. We're not going to go all the way through writing out all their factors, but we're going to at least try to find what that biggest number you can divide by is. So looking at the numbers, 2x and 8, biggest number you can divide by, give you a chance to think about that. And the biggest number should be a 2. In other words, your greatest common factor here would be a 2. So what you do, you say number 2, and then in parentheses, you write what you get when you divide. 2x divided by 2 should just be x. And then 8 divided by 2 is 4. You're subtracting in between, so keep it subtraction, and there's your final answer. So then number 2, we're going to do pretty much the same thing. 12x squared plus 10. Look for your GCF, biggest number you can divide by. it turns out this one's also a 2. This is just the biggest number you could divide each of those by evenly. So 12x squared divided by 2. Remember, put the 2 in front of the parentheses. 12 divided by 2 would be 6, so you'll have 6x squared. 10 divided by 2 would be 5, and then you're adding in between. There's your final answer. Tell you what, try number 3 on your own. So if you need to pause the video, go ahead and pause it. Try this one on your own, and then we'll go over it in just a second. All right, so number 3. Hopefully you said that the GCF, the biggest number you could divide by, would be the number 3. So then parentheses, 3x squared divided by 3 is just x squared. 9 divided by 3 is just 3. And there's your final answer. Okay, so now let's talk about what to do if there's variables. So on example right here, x to the 4th plus x squared. Some of you might be able to see the biggest variables that they have in common is just x squared. If you can't, and this one's a little bit harder to see, what you do for the first term, which was x to the 4th, if you were to list out all the factors, basically it just means write out x 4 times. 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then do the same thing for x squared. That's your second term, so write out all the factors. In other words, just write out x 2 times. And then look for where your overlap is. So you've got x and x here. You've got x and x here. And then that's as much as they have in common. So your greatest common factor is x multiplied by x, which is x squared. Now when you divide, here's where the tricky part is. You put the x squared in front. When you take x to the 4th and divide it by x squared, remember you subtract the exponent. So 4 minus 2 would be x to the power of 2. Now, here's the tricky part. For the second term, where you got x squared divided by x squared, you still subtract the exponents. 2 minus 2 is 0. But then, instead of saying plus x to the power of 0, remember anything to the power of 0 is just what? It's just a 1. Yeah, very nice. So then you put a 1 there and say x squared plus 1. Okay, so now let's do that for each of the next step. So on number 4, the biggest variable they both have in common for a GCF, notice they both have an x. One has x squared, one has x. So the most x's you can take away from both of them would just be a 1. But also notice that 9 and 21 are both divisible by the same number. They're both divisible by 3. So when you factor out a 3 and an x, here's how that works. You take 9 divided by 3, which is 3. X squared, take away 1x is just x. And then 21 divided by 3 is a 7. X, take away 1x, and you don't have any x's left. Keep it as subtraction and close your parentheses. Alright, tell you what, try number 5 on your own. It's very similar. Look for your GCF, so look for the biggest number and variable you can divide both terms by, and then we'll go over here in just a second. Alright, here we go. So, 15 and 20, I always look at numbers first, because I can usually figure those out a little quicker. And the biggest number you can divide both those by is number 5. Now for x squared and x, you can divide both of those, at least divide 1x out, and it looks like that's all you'll be able to do. So remember, put 5x in front of the parentheses, then take 15 divided by 5, which is 3, x squared divided by x, so take away 1x, and you still have 1x inside the parentheses. Then take 20 divided by 5 is a 4. X, take away 1x, and you don't have any left, so close your parentheses, and here's your final answer. Alright, number 6. Now we've got 3 terms. It turns out you do the exact same thing. So you look for what is the biggest number and variable you can divide all of those by. Well, for number 6, the biggest number you can divide them all by is a 6. And they all have at least one x, so we'll be able to divide out an x as well. So you'll put the 6x in front of the parentheses. 12 divided by 6 is 2. If you've got 3 x's, take away 1, but still have 2 x's, or x squared, left in the parentheses. Then 6 divided by 6 is a 1. You really don't need the 1, but you can put it there. Then x squared divided by x. So x squared loses 1x, still has 1. And let's see, negative 30 divided by 6 is negative 5. X, take away 1x, and there's none left. Here would be your final answer. Alright guys, that is all the notes that we are going to worry about for today. Make sure you show these to the sub and they will give you your homework for the rest of today. Just as a reminder too guys, as soon as you're done with the homework, which the homework is worksheet 9.6, there's going to be a couple of other things the sub will give to you to work on that I want you to work on. There are these, they're called product and sum puzzles. And they're kind of a fun way to do like a math brain teaser kind of thing. And there's a couple of them, so make sure you work through both of them. If you get through product and sum puzzles 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, then you can have free time. Otherwise, guys, you should have something that you're working on most of today. All right. Have a good rest of your Thursday, guys. I'll see you on Friday.